that my philosophy is start on time, end early. My most valuable resource is my time, and I imagine it certainly is for you too, and I appreciate you spending some time with us this evening and learning how to use a graphing calculator to help teach algebra to middle school. My name is Nancy Foote. I've been teaching for a long time. I'm sorry, I just lost my PowerPoint. There we go. I'm a chemist by trade, but I've been teaching for over 20 years. I have been teaching mostly middle and high school, middle school lately quite a bit, and I love using the calculators. I love using the Casio calculators. I found personally that it makes it easy for me to use it, and if I can figure out how to use something, then my kids can figure out how to use something. I want them to get used to using a calculator as a tool from the time they start middle school. And actually, I've used graphing calculators with kids as young as 5th grade. I want them to get into the habit of using it. I don't want it to be anything big or scary or unwieldy. I want it to be a tool. You know, they know how to use their cell phones. They know how to use their iPods. They know technology probably better than you or I, certainly better than I do. And I just want them to know the calculator is a tool that's there to help them. So let's go ahead and jump in. So what are we going to do today? Let's see if I can get this to go to the next slide. There we go. First of all, thank you for attending. We're going to talk specifically about the FX9750G2. And that was my choice of calculator because it's very easy to use, it's very cost efficient, it's reasonable to have a class set of 9750G2s. Today we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're doing very, very basics with the 9750G2. So if you've never used a calculator, a graphing calculator before, or a Casio graphing calculator before, I think you're in for a real treat. When I first learned how to use a graphing calculator, I will admit my age. I learned how to do math on a slide rule. I was intimidated and frightened to use it, but the 9750G2 is very intuitive. I've opened it up. You see a picture of the emulator software on the right. The first thing my kids always say to me is, but Mrs. Foote, there's no equal sign, and there's not. That's a really important thing for kids to know and for you to recognize right away. There is no equal sign because this calculator does a lot more than just computations. You'll find an equal sign on a calculator that does computations, but this has an execute button, which basically says, do what I just told you to do. Okay, let's go over real briefly. We're going to do operations and expressions, various function information, graphing linear equations, and if we get to it, some quadratic basics. So the first thing we're going to do, if you happen to have a calculator with you, you can go ahead and pull it out and press the keys along with me, because one of the things I found is the person who's pressing the keys is the person who's doing the learning. I've also asked Nathan to make sure that he videotape or captures this webinar so that you'll be able to refer back to it again and again if you have questions and you can't remember how we put things together. So this is the emulator software. It basically is a computer-generated calculator that looks and acts just like a regular calculator. This screen on the side here is where we can actually record all of our keystrokes. So it's really helpful if you have kids that are absent, you're teaching them something on the calculator. You can send them this file, they can go back, they can watch it, they can actually see every keystroke that you took. So the first thing we're going to do, oops, I didn't want to start with quadratics, that was the last one. Let's see if I can scoot to the right screen. I don't know where looks like I'm upside down on here. So let me restart this. And I apologize for this. If you'll just give me a quick second, I'll see if I can find. Nathan, can you help me find my original screen that I had here? Do you happen to know?
It's a little tricky when I can't see the screen you've got.
Oh,
My
this
view
is true.
doesn't match yours. But do you have like a minimize button or a full screen? You know, that little window? I'm not sure what you got on your screen. Because I think it truncates what we can actually see. I have one that
says, oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. You're right, you're right, you're right. There we go. Okay, now I can go back and start all over again. And I apologize for this. I had everything set up with the best laid plans, as they say, right? So let's go back and reopen my PowerPoint. Not sure why it did what it did, but we want to go to screen 3. That's what I want. and let's open it up as a PowerPoint and reopen our calculator. Again, I apologize. There we go. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to turn your calculator on, and you're going to get this screen that looks like this, and you go, wow, that's kind of intimidating. I always tell my kids the very first thing to do is look for the Run Mat button, because that means it's just like a regular calculator. There's two ways you can access that. One is by highlighting it. You see how it's darker there? And then just hit execute, which says do what I just told you to do. The other way, if you'll notice there's a little 1 in the corner here, you can simply hit the 1 and you go automatically to that function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to enter 4/5. To enter 4/5, we're going to use this button right here. And actually, let me take a step back and give you a little bit of information. Just like kids are really well versed with cell phones, and they know the shift and they know the alpha lock and the function, it's the same thing. Any key that's written in red, you have to hit the alpha before you get it. Anything that's written in yellow or gold, you have to hit the shift before you get it. So that's basically all we're doing. So to enter 4/5, we're going to hit 4, and then we're going to hit ABC and 5th, and then execute. Great, right? So that's exactly what I put in. But let's say we want to change that to a decimal. We hit this button right here, F to D, and it toggles it back and forth between a fraction and a decimal. I like to have my kids convert fractions to decimals and then use this to check their answers, make sure they're right. Okay, and it'll just keep doing it as many times as you want. So entering fractions is very easy. Same thing with improper fractions. So if I want to change 14/3, I'm going to type in 14, and I call this the ABC button for obvious reasons. ABC, 3. Again, there's no equal sign. I'm going to hit execute. I get 14/3. If I want to change it to a decimal, I hit the F to D button. But what if I want to change that instead to a mixed number? Well, do you see this little thing here where it says ABC and then the arrow DC? We're going to hit Shift and FD, and that's 4 2/3. The first number is your whole number, the first number before that little backwards 7. 4 2/3. Pretty easy, I think. Again, to find the decimal equivalent, you type in your fraction and hit execute, and then F to D converts it back and forth, fraction to decimal to fraction to decimal. I know when we have our high-stakes tests here in Arizona, there is a ton of asking kids to order fractions, decimals, percents, and they struggle with it. My kids struggle with that a lot. The more practice I can give to them, the better off it is for them, the better off it is for me. So they love using the calculators. It's a real treat for them. So I can practice on putting numbers in order and then give them the calculator and let them use it as a tool. In my classroom, we have two kinds of days. We have pretty number days and we have ugly number days. In Arizona, we're not allowed to use calculators on any of the high-stakes tests at all. Not allowed. So my kids need to know how to manipulate numbers without using a calculator. But yet a calculator is a tool that makes their mathematical operations so much more efficient. You know, it was wonderful when they invented nail guns and they didn't have to hammer nails in houses anymore. And I say this is kind of like that. It's a tool that kids should know how to use. And so my kids will walk in and they say, is it ugly numbers today? Because they know that means they can grab their calculator. If it's pretty numbers, it's numbers that they can pretty much do in their head, you know, 360 divided by 90, that kind of thing. Numbers that I expect they'll be able to do in their head, because that's what it's like on our high-stakes tests. So if you haven't given a try to pretty numbers, ugly numbers, you may want to try it. Kids really like it. All right, the next thing is we're going to evaluate an expression, but I want you to know that the calculator follows the order of operation rules. Some calculators go left to right as you input it. These follow the order of operations rules. So we're going to do 15 minus 7 plus 8 times 3 minus 4. We're not going to hit execute yet because I want to talk to my students and I want them to understand that if they do PEMDAS, and I know PEMDAS is coming under a lot of heat these days, you know, because kids think it's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, and then division, when it's not. It's multiplication and division left to right. However, I still think it has its purpose. I have my kids evaluate that, and then we hit execute and see if they're right. I like to show them how much different a set of parentheses means by giving them that very same expression, only this time I'm going to put parentheses around the 7 plus 8. And the calculator knows that we do parentheses first. So that times, oops, I put 2 in, let me point them out, times 3 minus 4, and then we evaluate. Huge different number, totally different number, simply based on that parentheses, and that's what we would expect. I give my kids lots and lots and lots of practice. I have them make up challenges for each other. I know that maybe in some states, in some districts, order of operations, the kids just know it. Our kids still need practice with it. Practice, practice, practice. And on Fridays, we do a lot of practice of this kind of thing. Next thing I want to do is show you how to raise things to an exponent. Again, pretty intuitive. You press the 9, there's your little caret top, and that means raise that to the power of 2, and you hit execute, and there it is. Makes it nice and easy for us, nice and easy for the kids, allows them to see exactly what it is that they are calculating. All right, ready to do the fun stuff? We're going to do some functions now. I called it fun with functions. My kids don't necessarily think I've got it all together because they don't find this fun, but that's okay. We're going to hit the menu button, and the menu button always takes you back to this screen which shows you all of the different options you have. If you'll notice this little arrow right here on the right of your screen, that just tells you that there's more information below it, and you can actually go down and see what that additional information is, what those additional options are. So before we're going to graph, though, I want to show you how to store. I want to show you how to store a variable. So to store a variable, you just go into the Run Map menu. Again, you can press 1 here, or you can make sure this is highlighted and just hit execute. And if I don't like that, if all that stuff is bothering me, I can just clear it out. I don't have to look at it. So to store a value, it's really easy. I'm going to press 5, and I'm going to press this. I call this the right arrow. I call these the replay buttons to differentiate between the two. So 5, right arrow, and then this is the variable key. This stands for all kinds of variables. So I'm going to press that, and I'm going to hit execute. And now what I've told the computer is anytime I press an X, I want you to see that as a 5. So now let's go ahead and see what that looks like. We're going to go to the main menu, and this time we're going to highlight the table icon. The table icon is number 5, so you can either press 5 and enter. I'm sorry, I had an equation in there. Or you can just highlight the 5 and then hit execute. If you get something like this where you have a function, do you see how this says delete? These are soft keys. You press the button directly underneath them, and it'll ask you a question if it's got a black background. It says, I need some more information. What formula do you want? Do you want to delete this formula? And I want to, so I'm going to say yes, F1. All right, so let's go back. Into here we're going to put a function. Let's put a simple function. Let's say it's 3x minus 1. So I'm going to type 3 and then my variable key minus 1. And I have to press execute at this point because I have to tell the calculator that I'm not going to give you any more information. That's the whole function. And if you'll notice, the equal sign has a little black shading around it. That tells you that that's the function that is now active. Okay? In order to get a table of values, I can just look here and I see that it says table. It's above the F6 key. I press the F6 key and there's my table of values. When X is 1, Y is 2, etc., etc. I can go all the way down and it stops at 5. Well, what if that wasn't enough? What if I wanted to know what would X be at 12? I can simply type in 12 and hit execute, and it tells me what Y is when X is 12. I also have the option of changing my screen. The default is this is that X starts at 1 and it ends at 5, and it goes by increments of 1. And that's great in some cases, but in other cases that doesn't tell me what I need to know. So in order to change it, I'm going to exit. Exit means take me back one step. It's kind of like, you know how you have delete on your computer and then you have that back arrow? Well, exit's like the back arrow. It takes you back one step. Only this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my table. So do you see right here where it says set? It says set right above F5, start at 1, end at 5. Well, let's say I wanted to start at 0. Again, I have to hit execute because I need to make sure that it knows that's the last thing I'm telling it about the start point, and end at 20. Again, hit execute because otherwise it thinks maybe I want 200. It doesn't know. And steps of 1 are fine. I'm okay with steps of 1. And there you go. It starts at 0 and it's going to go all the way to 20. And how I get there is simply on my replay key, I press the down arrow until I get where I'm going. Again, keep in mind if you want to change and look for a different X value, you can put in any, different Y value, you can put in any X value you want. And there's your Y value for that. So you're not limited to what's in the table. It's really, really flexible. This is really important when you have kids, when you give them the equation and you say evaluate for x equals 3 or whatever. This works for quadratic functions, any cubic functions, anything that you need. Struggle a little bit when it's like x squared minus 3 or negative x squared minus 3. They're not sure if the negative belongs to the x or the square or what they should do. This makes it better for them. I hope if you have any questions that you're asking Austin or Nathan as we go along. So, all right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to enter data into a list. So sometimes you have the data, but you don't have the equation. You have the data, and you want to see, is this going to make a line or not? So we're going to go back to the main menu, and this time we're going to go to the stat plot, S-T-A-T, and we're going to go to number 2. Again, you can arrow over and hit execute, or you can simply hit the number 2, and you'll get to the same spot. Well, right now I have some data in my table, so let's take that out. I'm just hitting the delete key. And let's put some new numbers in. In list 1, I'm going to put numbers 1, 2, and 3. And 3. There we go. And in list 2, I'm going to put 3, 5, and 7. Now, when I do this with my students, I have them put the X, Y point in at the same time. I don't have them put all the X's and all the Y's. I want them to start thinking about ordered pairs. I want them to get used to the fact that there's that in a function there's that one-to-one correspondence, and I just want them to start thinking about those pairs. So, okay, we've got our 2 lists. We've got 3 numbers in each list. We want to know if that makes a line or not. Is it a linear function? So right here on above F1 it says graph, and so we're going to press that, and we're going to press it a second time because there's lots of different options that we have that we'll talk about in a future webcast or webinar, but we want to graph 1, and that's what we have. So it looks linear to me. I'm not positive, but I'm going to press calculate. Because it looks linear, I'm going to press the X, and I want it in y equals mx plus b form, and there's my equation. So my slope is 2, my intercept is 1, and this R value is a regression value, and the closer to 1 that is, the more closer you are to an absolutely perfect straight line. So I'd say, yeah, we had some great linear points there. Ready to move on? Okay. Let me go back to our menu here. Let's jump down to another screen right here. All right, graphing equations, changing the viewing window, etc., etc. So one of the things I spend an incredible amount of time on with my students is graphing equations. We graph equations given points. We graph equations given slope-intercept form, given equations. We graph, and yet they still struggle with it. They struggle a little bit with the algebra, getting an equation in the mx plus b format, and they struggle with their confidence. And so what I like to do is I like to have them do some graphing and then compare it to what the calculator says is right. Is the calculator always right? Pretty much, but not always. So if you put information in wrong, you're going to get information out right. It does graph exactly what you tell it. sometimes kids forget parentheses or that kind of thing, and that causes a problem. So let's go ahead and graph a menu. So we're on our main menu. Again, if you're lost and need to get back, just hit menu right here. Exit only takes you back one step. Menu takes you back to this screen. And because we're going to graph, we're going to go to number 3, graph. And to get there, I'm just going to push the number 3. I'm not going to highlight over to the number 3. I have an equation there, so I'm going to delete it. I want to clear it out. I press F2, which is right underneath my delete button. Yes, I want to delete my formula, and now it's nice and empty. Okay, so let's put the equation 2x plus 4. So 2, and notice I use this x right here. I use the variable x. I can use this x here, but it doesn't, for linear it works fine, but it doesn't always. So let's go ahead and just use the variable. Get used to using the variable x right up here. 2x plus, what did I say, plus 4. And I'm going to hit execute because now I'm done putting my function in. You'll notice behind my equal sign I got that little black mark, which means that that one is active. That was my only struggle when I first started using graphing calculators. I thought that Y2 was active because it's highlighted, but actually it's the one with the darkened shade behind the equal sign. So we want to draw this. What do we have to do to draw it? Again, you can look down on your soft menu and you see the word draw. That's a pretty good indication that if you click that, you'll get something. Now, that's not exactly what I wanted. I don't know what my intercept is. I can't see my numbers. That doesn't give me a lot of information, but all I have to do is change my view window. I can use my arrows to move up and down, left and right. Okay, if all I wanted was my y-intercept, I could go, okay, I'm pretty sure, yep, that looks like it's on 4. But I want to see the whole graph, so I'm going to go ahead and make a change. I'm going to hit Shift and F3. Do you see above the F3 it says V window? That's view window. And I want to change my view window. So Shift and F3. And that's what it was showing. Well, no wonder. That's a mess. I want the standard 1010, right? So I press standard. I press F3 because that's right under the standard. And that looks good to me. I'm going to press execute because, again, I have to tell the calculator that I'm done giving it information. It takes me back to this, and if I draw it, there's my 1010. If I want to zoom, I hit Shift Zoom, and I can zoom in. Oops, sorry, did that wrong. Or I can zoom out, whichever way I want. The one I really like, though, is the auto, which gives me exactly what I want. It lets me see that it is a linear function, that it does have a nice y-intercept. We already looked at it before and we saw that it was 4, which is what we expected because our equation was 2x plus 4. So you can see your whole graph. Let's see, calculate y value given x value. Okay, so we're going to go to Shift G solve, and I'm going to actually calculate. I'm going to do y calculate, so I'm going to give it an x value. Let's say my x value is 5. At 5, my y value is 14. That's all I had to do. How did I do that again? Shift G solve. This little arrow here tells you there's more information. If I was doing a quadratic, I might want to find the maximum or the minimum. I might want to find the roots, but I have a linear function here, so all I want to do is find the y value, F6 over, and I can pick. Do I want the x to be calculated or the y to be calculated? Let's say this time I want the x to be calculated. My y value of 10, execute, x is 3 when y is 10. And what I really like is it always gives you the x first. X is always first, y is always second. I can arrow over, I can arrow down. I can't arrow down when I do this. Never mind, pretend like I didn't say that. All right, so I've got calculate the y given the x, calculate the x given the y. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part, which is quadratics, I believe. Yep, graphing with quadratics. That was the window I couldn't get rid of before. Let's go back to our menu. We're going to graph x squared minus 9. And since we're going to graph, I can stay right here on the graphing screen. That's not exactly what I wanted, so let's get back out of there. Again, exit takes you back one window. I'm done with that function. I don't want that function anymore. I'm going to delete it, F1. And I'm going to put in my new function. My new function was x squared minus 9. So I key in x squared minus 9. Notice that's not highlighted yet, so it's not active. Execute. And now I see that that is an active equation. Want to draw it? Let's draw it. Ah, that's pretty. That's very pretty. This is the default window. If you notice, it's rectangular. It's not square. If you want a square window, you can go to Shift, View Window, and set up your standard window. But I think we'll leave it there. I think we'll leave it right where it is. So let's go ahead and import a function and generate a table. And I'm skipping this adjust the viewing window if necessary because I like that, but if you wanted to adjust the viewing window, you could adjust the viewing window however you want here. The other option that you have is you can always zoom auto, which is going to give you a different kind of view of the same thing. I like to see more of the y-axis, so that's not the best for me, but you might like it that way. Okay, so let's go on to this. Oh, sorry, typo. Generate a table of values. So if we're going to go to table, I think we should probably use 5, which is table. And you notice my function is imported. You don't have to put the function in over and over and over and over again. You put it in. It's gonna be there. Oh, I went too fast. Sorry. It's going to be there when you're ready for it. Okay. So there's my function. Notice that you've got your little equal sign and it's all set. To generate a table of values, you can hit table. Again, remember that it's going to start at 1 and this one's going to go farther because what did I set the default on the last one? I said 0 to 20. If I hadn't set that, it would have been 1 to 5. Okay? So you can always change that. All you have to do is use exit to go to the table home screen. F5 is set. Tell it where you want it to start, -20, and where you want it to end, +20. And this time, I want to go and take a look at what that looks like. Goes from -20, and it'll keep going all the way up to +20. So I've now taken my graph, taken my formula and turned it into a table. My kids graph points. They do learn how to graph, straight from the equation. They learn how to graph points. They learn how to use slope intercept. All of that. That's really good for them. So now let's go ahead and figure out how we could find the roots of a function. So we're going to use the menu, and we're going to go back, because what do we want to do? We want to look at the graph when we're doing roots, right? We want to look at the graph. So again, we go to our handy-dandy G-Solve, which is right above F5. Shift, G-Solve, and then I want to find roots. And it actually shows me x is -3 when y is 0, and x is 3 when y is 0. That's exactly what we expected. If we factored this equation, if set y equals 0 and factor the equation, you get -3, +3. Well, this way the kids can actually see it. Again, I don't like this window, so I'm going to V window. There we go. I'm going to change it back to the standard, I think, because I like the standard better. It's just a personal preference. And now I'm going to draw it, and there I can see it a little bit better. So Shift, G-Solve, root. It gives you one root. You use your replay arrow over to the next. It gives you your second root, and it actually tells you what you're getting. Same thing if we wanted to find intercepts. Shift, G-Solve. Now we want to find the y-intercept. It tells you the y-intercept is -9. It tells you here that what they're giving you is the y-intercept. And it also tells you that it shows you right where it is on the graph. If we want to find a minimum value in this equation, there would be a minimum value, not a maximum value. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to G-Solve, and we're going to say what's the minimum value. Now it tells you again when x is 0, y is negative 9, so that's your minimum value. So as you can see, you can use this for the most basic of algebra, solving equations, evaluating equations given different values, graphing linear equations, graphing quadratics. It's a tool. It's a tool for the kids to use, and I like it a lot. I think it helps my students a lot. I think there was find the y-intercept. Oh, I know what I skipped, the x and y for specific values. So again, let's go back into our graph. Let's draw this, and we're going to do gsolve, and we're going to arrow over F6 xcal, so put in a y value. It tells you what x is, and likewise you can do ycal, put in an x value, and it'll tell you what your y is at that point. So very versatile, very helpful, very useful for my students. I know this was a very basic introduction to how I use the FX 9750 G2 for my algebra, middle school algebra kids, and I know that we've got more in-depth webinars planned, but that's all I have for today. So does anyone have any questions? Nathan, do you have, yeah, Nathan, do you have anything that you would like me to address?
So far there have not been any questions, and I have a few things that I might suggest mentioning, but not necessarily just about the 9750. I wanted to talk about software options. So because I'm not sure of those who have joined us this evening, how many of you might have used our software or calculators before. But first, maybe if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat field, and we can address those. Otherwise, I can share a few other thoughts with you. Pausing a moment just to see if anyone is asking anything. Well, I'll tell you what, while we're waiting for potential questions, it occurred to me while I was listening to Nancy that, if any of you could not follow along because perhaps you don't have one of our Casio calculators or our software, we do have, I do see a hand. I'm not sure if that's a question from Julia or if there's a way. I don't know how to, oh, there, let me see. Yeah, maybe I can unmute.
Why don't we have Julia on mute? Can she unmute herself?
I'm trying to do it right now. How's that? Can we hear you, Julia?
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. I was wanting you to talk about the emulator software. I've used the Casio for years and years, but the emulator software I have not seen before. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Would you like to talk about it, Nancy?
You know what, I'll give you the standpoint from my viewpoint, and then you can just jump in at the end. I use the emulator software all the time. Anytime I've got this, we have both smartboards and Prometheans in school, so I get it up there, I have it recording. This little red button here records it, and then I save it, and it's so powerful when kids, you have kids on IEPs, you have kids who are absent, you have kids who are having an off day. For them to be able to go to the computer lab or wherever they happen to be and view it step by step is a very powerful thing. The playback is incredibly powerful. Also, I can remove the front part and I can make it bigger so that it's easier for them to see. Also, I can capture this and put this all in a Word document. And that is also very helpful because then what they see on a test or a quiz looks exactly like what they saw on their computer. Nathan, anything to add?
Yeah. The other thing I would mention is you can download a trial version of our software. I'm completely blanking out suddenly on if we have this 9750 software trial version downloadable online. We certainly have sort of the next generation of this called the Prism, that's definitely available online.
And I will tell you that the Prism is an amazing piece of equipment. It's wonderful.
Yeah, essentially what we have right now going on is we have three kind of tiers of our graphing calculators. And what Nancy here was showing you is our entry-level model. And it generally goes for around $50. And so therefore, it's really great for like a middle school level, getting students started. This calculator will do everything you need through high school, really. And then as you move up in quality, we start to have what's called a natural display, where you get everything with nice square roots and fractions looking exactly like they do in a textbook, and better screen, bigger screen, things like that. And then our newest model that we're really excited about has color. So maybe what I'll do, I know who's here. I think I will. Oh, I see. I'll answer your question in a second, Jeffrey. Like after this is all over, I'll send each of you an email with where you can look up our emulator online, and you can get again a free trial version for, I think it's 90 days. But if you participate, we have an online tutorial that'll show you a lot of this stuff at your own pace. You can dig in and toy around with it, and you'll end up sending emails to me, actually. And if you complete the course for a limited time, we're still giving away our newest Prism, either the emulator software or a handheld calculator. So if you're at all interested, I'll drop you an email with that information. Okay. While I was talking, we got a question from Jeffrey, and I'm trying to read this. Let's see. He had a cubic function. Interesting. Tell you what, Jeffrey, it's going to take me a second. He's actually asking a bit of a technical math question, and I just want to look into it. So I'm going to pass it back over to Nancy really fast while I give this some thought, because I can't do this in my head in like 2 seconds. So I'll pass it back to you briefly, Nancy.
Okay. All right, and let me know when you're done. Not only can you get your free Prism from doing the online tutorial, they have another calculator called the ClassPad. I've done both of the tutorials mainly because I wanted the free calculator. But the Prism is an amazing. You can take a picture, a photograph, and import it into the calculator. Well, not the calculator, the emulator software, and figure out the parabola of, for instance, a water fountain. Or when I was at NCTM in Albuquerque, that we were in this building that had these beautiful beams in the ceiling, and I kept thinking, I wonder if those are really right triangles. And you could take pictures, and your kids could actually calculate whether or not that was a right triangle. But the reason that I like the 9750 G2 is because it's affordable. For me to ask PTO or to write a grant proposal or whatever I need to do for calculators that cost $50, my biggest class is 34. I don't know what yours are, but mine is 34. And so to get a class at a 34 when they're $50 a piece is a lot more likely to happen. Plus, I want my kids to have this in their hands from day one. I want them to be so used to it. I teach at the community college as well, and yesterday I saw a sign that said, here's the 5 days you can come to learn how to use your calculator, and that made me kind of sad. I don't want my students to have to do that in 4 or 5 years when they get to the college level. So if anybody else has any questions, you can go ahead and ask Austin. I, for some reason, can't see the questions, but heck, I even had trouble getting the PowerPoint to go. So.
Yeah, I hope I addressed Jeffrey's question. I tried to respond privately. I think it's well, we'll see. We'll see if I made a mistake myself. But any other questions? Okay. Well, again, I will send you all an email with some links I think you might find helpful, and feel free to email me anytime with any questions. And
if there's any specific topic that you would like to see a webinar on, please let us know that too, because we're trying to do webinars of things that people need, and my little corner of the world, I can tell you what I need, but I don't know what you need. So please let us know that as well.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I should have thought of that. We're always interested in those kind of suggestions. So. Okay. Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us tonight. I appreciate you spending your time with us.
Have a good evening, and you'll receive an email from me shortly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.